Okay. I'll start. I'm Carol Ann. I'm a senior special education major.
I'm
I can go
Kara.
next. Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
I'm Kara. I'm a sophomore professional public writing and women's and gender studies major.
I'm Katie. I'm a sophomore and I'm an English education major.
My name's MJ. I'm a senior English major.
So a little bit about Layli Long Soldier is that she is a poet, a writer, a feminist, an artist, and an activist.
And like we heard from the presentation in class, we learned that she graduated from the Institute of American Indian Arts with her bachelor's in fine arts. So, all right. What you guys think about like reading the book as a whole? I thought it was challenging because I'm like not very used to reading poems, and like when I read the poems, I feel like I would sometimes miss the meaning, so I'd go back and try to like pick apart the sentences.
Yeah, I
it was
definitely agree. I like poetry isn't my strong suit, so I did have a hard time reading it. And I also struggled with like the pauses in her writing. Like I know they mean something, but I struggled like reading it, trying to read it how she would.
Definitely.
Yeah, I agree. It was challenging at first, and Carol Ann, like you said, I had to go through every poem a few times. But once I started getting it and yeah, like trying to read it how I thought that she intended for it to be read, I started to really enjoy like kind of picking apart the meaning in each poem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and she's like if you look up her own readings for reference, I did that personally, and she is a very slow reader, like emphasizing each word, each line, so it really like slows you down to absorb like all of her material because a lot of it is like historical, deals with like colonialism and like Native American struggle and like her personal like thoughts and feelings, and then like the overall theme of like grass is very present in
And
land.
it's like her poems were all spaced different, so I definitely felt like there was certain meaning behind like the certain spacing, and like Katie said, trying to figure out why was like hard
Yeah,
but also interesting.
yeah, she plays with a lot of different formatting styles, which also made it like a unique read. It definitely is a more challenging like poetry collection, but like all
Oh
of
yeah.
her different formats and like sectioning of her poems was very unique, and I've never seen someone utilize that many different forms.
Yeah, I agree. And you can also really see like Native American culture within her writing, just like an appreciation from a land, looking as land as a teacher to society. And you can see that present in her poetry as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Also,
MJ,
like,
do you want to start with yours?
Oh yeah, Kara, were you gonna say something else?
oh, I was just gonna say, I also noticed that she was really respectful of history and how she told each story in her poems, which is something that really stood out to me.
That's a
Yeah.
good point.
Yeah, I can go ahead with my poem. I selected the poem is 38. It's on page 49. This one really stood out to me because I think it overall encapsulates a lot of the book's themes and the book's purpose. It's about the Dakota 38, which is a historical tragedy, and it gives you a really deep history lesson, to be honest. It talks a lot about what it is while also discussing like the structure. The beginning of her poem, she addresses here, the sentence will be respected. I will compose each sentence with care by minding the rules of writing. And she says, for example, all sentences will begin with capital letters. So this is like a really personal address to the audience. And she's telling you like, I'm going to structure it properly. I'm going to punctuate properly because this is like a serious matter that she's writing about. And it goes into what the Dakota 38 is. And it was a hanging that took place in December of 1862. And it kind of highlights, I don't want to use the term irony because I don't want to be insensitive to this subject matter, but when we hear like President Abraham Lincoln, we think, okay, like he freed the slaves, Emancipation Proclamation. And this talks about within that same week, he ordered this hanging of 38 Dakota Native American men. And it was because of the Sioux uprising. Sorry. And this was in Minnesota. And then the poem itself is all like, there's some like double and single like line stanzas, but it's all like really well spaced out.
Mhm.
So it like makes for like a really short read, and it's easy to follow through, which I think is important for this subject within this poem. And then I want to focus most on the ending because it gives you like event through everything that happens. But the very like last line, it says, sometimes when I'm in a circle, if I wish to exit, I must leap and let the body swing from the platform out to the grasses. So then we send ourselves back to the overall theme of grass. And then I'll show the camera, like the formatting here, which might be hard to see because it's backwards. But the actual structure fits in with what she's saying in the poem when she says, and let the body swing from the platform out. Your eyes get carried like left to right. So it kind of makes the platform and a body within this poem, and it swings your eyes out to follow and really digest like her overall message here. I think that's like the major points I wanted to address with this poem 38.
Something interesting was that I actually read this book. It's American Journal 50 Poems for Our Time, and they're all selected and introduced by Tracy K. Smith. I don't know if you guys have heard of her. She's a really good poet. I recommend her. But so this is like a collection of like books about the US. And when I read that poem, I was like, I've seen this before. Like, where have I seen this? And it's in one of the poems that she selected. And I remember reading it for the first time. I read it for a class last semester and thinking like, why is this not like I've never heard of this event happening before I read that poem. And like you said, like it is ironic because when we do think of Abraham Lincoln, we think of him as this president who fought racism and fought all this oppression in our nation. And then this went on when he was in office and I'd never even heard of it.
Yeah, definitely. Another very important piece of this poem, which also kind of ties back to the idea of irony, is these Dakota people were starving. The crops were not growing, and one of the main traders in the area, his name was Andrew Myrick. And then on that last page, he refused to provide credit to Dakota people by saying, if they are hungry, let them eat grass. They were starved so much to the point where he goes, oh, whatever, like eat grass, which is so inhumane. And then Myrick was murdered during the Sioux uprising, and his body was found with his mouth stuffed full of grass. So his own words came back like to bite him in his death, because that's like terrible. So it's kind of like that idea, like taste your own medicine, which was just a very full circle, ironic event and occurrence that I found really interesting. And I'm glad she included it in this piece.
I also think
Oh, go for it.
it's when she was describing how when his body was found, his mouth was stuffed with grass. I'll show the book. I have like a lot of notes in it, but that's the only other part where she uses that big space other than the ending of the poem. So I thought that that was really significant because it kind of created like a buildup and a sense of suspense before we find out that his mouth was stuffed with grass, which was really like the point that she wanted to drive home in the audience. So I thought that that was a really effective use of that more creative spacing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. Craft is very important in poetry, and I think this was executed like perfectly for this piece.
In a more literal sense on page 49 and 50, when they were I was looking at like when they talked about the 38 Dakota men hung, and the way she talked about the word hung and how she was like the past tense of hang is hung and the correct past tense is hanged. So why was 38 Dakota men hanged? And then how she goes on to talk about like US expanded territory, and then she put in quotations purchased land from Dakota people. And I thought this was like a good, like you said, a history lesson. And I know that's in a more literal sense, but that's not to me.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and throughout the book, I noticed that she, in multiple poems, references like specifically that this is the past tense of a verb. So I think that that's another way that she's like respecting the history of the events that she's talking about and like kind of putting them in perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree.
Kara, did you want to go to yours?
Yeah, sure. So I'm sharing on the poem on page 28, which does not have a title, but it's only about half a page. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically the first part, it starts out a poem about writing. Boring, says my contemporary artistic companionate. And then it goes on, it says, boring as it is, it asks me to do. And that reminds me of her poem on page 24, when she talks about thinking about writing poems and if you love something, let it go. If it returns, be a good mother. So I kind of interpreted that as let the idea go. And if it persists, then welcome it and work hard to put it into words. And so that's what she's doing on page 28. And then the second half of the poem, it starts out, defamiliarize your writing then. Somebody says, okay, I'm not sitting then, I say to somebody. I'm chewing at a funeral and I'm nibbling my pulp knuckles. I'm watching a man with a stain on his pants, always wrinkle in this heat, gnats and humidity. And then it goes on to describe the man who is at the funeral. He doesn't ever cry. She makes a lewd joke to him. And then the poem ends, what am I doing here writing? What am I doing here writing the page at funerals? And I thought that there were a lot of really interesting things about this poem. The fact that she refers to the man with the stain on his pants as the stained man, kind of made me think that like he himself is stained or like tainted or something is wrong. And it kind of like added an edge to the poem for me. And then also at the end, she says, he doesn't see me, my gesture's futile, what am I doing here? She sounds really weary and frustrated, which kind of goes along with the entire book. Like these must be really frustrating, emotionally draining subjects to write about. And so this whole poem kind of seems like she has had the ideas, she knows that she needs to write about these things because they're important to her and they're important to her community, but she also might feel like it's pointless sometimes or like it's so draining and like is she even going to have an impact? So, yeah.
What do you guys think about the very last sentence when she uses the word writing as in like with her hand, and then the second one she uses what am I doing, and she uses like the other form for writing, like RIGHT. What do you guys think that means? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I kind of think it might refer to her like writing history. So like we've been taught wrong this whole time. And in her poetry writing, she's also writing like with a R.
Right. I know
The
it's
story
hard
of
to tell, yeah.
history. Yeah, so like she's kind of fixing the mistakes that we've been taught all of our lives. So that is how I interpreted it, at least.
I can see what you mean, yeah, because I was sitting there looking at it and I was like, I like the way she put that though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and then another line that I really liked was towards the end, she says, in ritual, nobody's learning, true. And so that also makes me think about how she's trying to teach people, and it's repetitive, like she feels like people aren't learning or aren't growing from this process, which is the funeral and her writing and her poetry. Like it's just a ritual and she might again feel like it's pointless. So yeah, this was like a pretty emotional poem, I think, but I had to read it a few times to get there.
no, I like this one.
Yeah. And I think we have about 5 minutes left. So did someone want to share another poem?
I can do mine. Mine's a different page 66. I chose this one because I felt like it had a different sort of vibe. I got the vibe of like motherhood through it. I don't know, just because it talks about I'll read like a few of the stanzas. It says, whereas my eyes land on shoreline of the arrival of the Europeans in North America opened a new chapter in the history of Native peoples, because in other, I hate the act. And then she talks about my daughter picks up new habits from friends. She'd been running, tripped, slid on knees and palms and onto asphalt. They carried her into the kitchen. She fell, she's bleeding. And then I looked at her face, a smile, a nervous laugh, doing as her friends do. And then she talked about, but I could spot it. Stop, my girl. If you're hurting, cry. And then at the end, it says, I shake the realization that it took this phrase to show my daughter's quiver isn't new, but a deep practice, very old. She's watching me. So it's like, I don't know about you guys, but I felt like she was trying to say that like she's holding back her feelings and her emotions, like she had to. But I don't know what you guys feel about that one.
I got the sense, I agree with that for sure. I also got the sense that like she watches her mother and how strong her mother is and doesn't want to be perceived as weak by her. Like she wants to be strong like her mom. I also got that vibe from it.
Right.
Mhm.
Thought it was
And then it's,
interesting.
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
And then when it says, yeah, I'm serious when I say I laugh reading the phrase open a new chapter. I can't help my body. I don't know. I feel like this just shows like some of her emotions and how it's like reflecting on her daughter. And that kind of reminds me of Memorial Drive, you know, how like just like sometimes I feel like the kids can see that like their like the oppression, discrimination on their parents. And it's like it almost reflects on them in a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so complex because like she's in that same stanza, she's saying, in our home, in our family, we are ourselves, real feelings, be true. So she's saying that her daughter can express those emotions, but she's also saying that she's serious when she doesn't express those emotions. So like
Mhm.
it's
Right.
natural for her to suppress them. So it's like such a complex relationship.
Right. Is there any final things you guys want to say? I know we only have like 2 minutes.
Oh, do we have time to go over my poem real quick? I won't read it. I'll just go over my points.
Yeah.
Go
For
for
sure.
it.
We have 2 minutes to 15 or 2 minutes to 20.
The 447 should be the 20. So 2 minutes. We can do it. We'll be good.
Well, I analyzed the poem Leftist. It's on page 20. And really what stuck out to me about this poem is she's just talking about like people who are on the left side of the political spectrum. Like liberals, they are in support of social change. And I thought it was really interesting. Like I personally thought it was like her saying like she thinks that liberals are allies with the Native American community and like they want to help them try and change like what we have socially, our issues with that. But what I loved about the poem is that it's literally all pushed to the left side of the page, which that goes again back to the importance of why she chooses certain formats. So that was just a brief overview because I don't want to run out of time.
I like how it goes. Not mere liberally, but more radical in support of social change. Yeah, I like that too. I like how it does match the title. It's kind of like pleasing to my eyes.
Yeah, it does for sure.
But no, this was a good read. Definitely more challenging, but
Yeah, challenging.
thank you guys.
Yeah.
Thanks
It's
for
definitely more
watching.
sophisticated.
Yeah.